I'm George Galloway, and I present كلمة on Mayadeen television. Here we are in London. I speak my words freely, either in Parliament, on television, here on the streets of London. كلمة means free word. That's what I speak. So كلمة is a two-way conversation. Check it out on Mayadeen television. Welcome to كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London. Now, for most people in the world, well, many people at least, Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States, is something of a monster, of apparently low intellect, certainly low morals, and levels of politesse that have never been seen in an elected politician before. That goes, actually, I'm sure, for most people in the United States of America, although Donald Trump retains a base of support which could just see him win a second term. But there's a reason for Donald Trump. Business as usual, the usual things, the usual political class were on the ballot paper when Donald Trump was elected, and the people rejected it because they had been up close and personal to the usual political class for a very long time, and a lot of good it had done them, and I mean that sarcastically. They had seen the deindustrialization of their own country. They had seen unlimited budgets for foreign wars, interventions, invasions, occupations all over the world. They were presented with a Democratic Party opponent to Donald Trump who typified, personified all that had gone before. The sense of entitlement of the so-called liberal elite in the United States. They knew instinctively that the pattern of foreign wars, foreign interventions, not America first, but anybody in America with money and anybody else in the world with money rather than themselves. It's now, I think, an established fact that Hillary Clinton lost the presidency of the United States rather than Donald Trump winning it. And she lost it in what's called the Rust Belt. It's called the Rust Belt for a reason, because the people were left to rust along with the industrial plant and machinery of deindustrialized United States of America. Now, the fact that Donald Trump campaigned on a platform of no more involvement in foreign wars and occupations, no more nation building around the world whilst their own nation atrophied and, industrially speaking, died, is a key factor in Donald Trump's victory. The fact that he hasn't kept that promise, the fact that he continues to make war and threaten war around the world, the fact that the factories are still rusting in the Rust Belt is, of course, a truism. But nonetheless, Donald Trump retains something of the anti-establishment, something of the outsider about him. He is hated by the normal, usual political class and their media echo chamber. He has surrounded himself with some of the worst people in history. And it's not entirely clear why he has, because those people have been leading him into one foreign policy disaster after another. The question of Palestine, Jerusalem, the so-called deal of the century, which turns out to be so bankrupt of any possibility of being a solution to the Israel-Palestine question, is, I think, the result of bad advisors. I have no doubt that Donald Trump's instinct is to trade, to bargain, to haggle, like some overinflated trader in the bazaar. But the people he has hired to do the lead-up work, the approach work, to set the scene for the haggling, have made an almighty disaster of the Israel-Palestine track. In Syria, I am sure that Donald Trump wanted to withdraw from Syria. I'm sure that Donald Trump wanted to make a deal, particularly with the Russian President Putin, to bring an end to the war in Syria, which has proved so disastrous for everyone in that country and has created a Frankenstein monster of enormous proportions of people who will at one stage spill out, cascade around the rest of the world, proving a clear and present danger to all of us. But again, the military-industrial complex, the cadre around him, have succeeded so far in making his plans for withdrawal from Syria more or less null and void. I'm sure that the same is true in Venezuela. The fiasco of the Juan Guaido coup, into which Trump was led by criminals, literally criminals, convicted criminals, like Elliot Abrams and John Bolton, who's not a convicted criminal, but is everyone's idea of a criminal, have led Trump into what is, frankly, not just a fiasco, but a piece of utter ridiculousness as political theatre, the likes of which has seldom been seen. And as I speak, the US Navy is steaming towards the Straits of Hormuz. The B-52 bombers are stacked up in Qatar, in America's biggest military base in the entire world. I just say, it's my honest view, that if Iraq turned out to be a military disaster for the United States, attacking Iran will knock it, as we say in England, into a cocked hat. Because I cannot think of a theatre of war so disaster-prone for the United States and any allies foolish enough to join her than any attempt at regime change and war in Iran. All of that is to set the scene, because here in England, he's coming over the horizon like a great orange blimp, like a great barrage balloon. He will soon be looming over London, because in probably her last act as Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May has forced the Queen to invite Donald Trump for a state visit. What greater indignity on a venerated old lady, as Queen Elizabeth II undoubtedly is, than to force her to give board and lodgings to Donald J. Trump. But that's what's happened. Whether he will be able to go down the Mall from Buckingham Palace in an open carriage must be open to question, because there will be 100, 200, 300,000 people there to try and burst the barrage balloon. But he is the recipient of a relatively rare honour of a royal invitation for a state visit to Britain. So we have an audience here of distinguished experts, one or two enthusiastic amateurs like me. We're discussing the coming state visit of Donald J. Trump. It's only fair I let the only American in the room, though I promise you he's a very different kind of American, to Donald Trump, one of America's finest journalists, Patrick Henningsen. Patrick, welcome to the show. What would you like to say? Did I characterize things correctly or not?
Generally, you put me really on the spot straight off the bat, George. I don't know quite where to start, but I will say that if you really wanted to make a difference, you mobilize to protest Trump. The blimps are coming out, the balloons are coming out. Stop the War Coalition is organizing, also involved in that as well. the Achilles heel of this administration, one of the Achilles heels is the issue of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So for everyone to pile in on that issue would severely weaken the credibility and the power that this administration is trying to overreach with at the moment. So there are opportunities. That's what I'll say is from an activist point of view straight off the bat. So rather than project your outrage, there's a lot of practical things that people can do to really hurt what is clearly trampling of rights, trampling of institutions that we've fought hundreds of years for, freedom of the press.
Trampling of the U.S. Constitution itself.
Exactly.
Which guarantees freedom of expression.
Yeah. So that's. I'm just being practical off the bat. That's one thing I would say to people. But in terms of this administration, I remember when George Bush came to England. London was on lockdown.
I was involved in a bit of pushing and pulling on that occasion.
5,000 personnel in total, including police, and locked down whole streets in London.
The Americans even brought their own sniffer dogs.
Yeah.
It was a bit of an insult to us, as if we didn't have sniffer dogs of our own.
1,000 Secret Service plus agents plus support staff. It was incredible.
Military helicopters. It was
incredible.
The full 9 yards.
Yeah, so I remember that. So is that what we're going to see this time around?
I expect so, but just shed some light on how it came to this. How did Donald Trump get elected?
Well, you brought up an interesting point. You said he is surrounded by some of the worst people imaginable. How did this happen? One of the reasons this happens is because the press piled in, the media, the establishment, with Russiagate, with the whole Russian conspiracy theory that the Russians somehow got Donald Trump elected. That weakened the president to the point where nobody wanted to be put forward as a cabinet appointee, okay? Literally, when Rex Tillerson resigned or was pushed out, there was also panic, that position, other positions. Who would want to go in front of the meat grinder of the congressional and Senate hearings for confirmation? The press was going to vilify them. They'd drag you every bit of your life with a fine-tooth comb. So they've isolated Trump in that sense. So the neoconservatives were all too willing and waiting in the background to take those positions. And so now you have a position where Donald Trump is doing the thing that he decried Obama for throughout the campaign, leading from behind.
He actually tweeted that Barack Obama will start a war with Iran in order to get elected.
Yeah, exactly. So it is the worst of all outcomes, but it was engineered very, very carefully by powers within the United States to put this president in a corner where he could never make good on any of his campaign promises. But this is also an important point. Every single U.S. president that I know of after Bill Clinton, George Bush, no nation building, Barack Obama, bring the troops home, the first thing I'll do, close Gitmo, Donald Trump, the same thing. What does that tell you about the American mainstream as a whole? It is anti-war. It is anti-colonial. It is anti-imperialist at its core. But everyone will always tap in to that sentiment in order to get elected. And then, of course, a very different thing happens.
Well, that raises a thing that's been said all my life and I've resisted all my life. Namely, the question that actually the president isn't in charge of the United States. That there's a deep state, there's a permanent state, there are permanent interests that get their way whoever is in the White House.
This is true, but the irony in this situation is we're in a post-political, we're moving into a post-political paradigm whereby someone like a Trump, an anathema to anything that we think is good and pure in politics, actually commands the voter base. The irony is they could
be
influence his
if
behavior
they wanted
but they have all been sent down a blind alley, a cul-de-sac with various devices and little psyops like QAnon. His supporters think that everything he does is 5D chess and everything's going to be the Trumptopia somewhere in the future that we'll all arrive at. So they've disempowered and emasculated his core support base through various things, and also of fear of being getting the press, the pit bulls of the press, to sort of maul you for another 2 years over being too sympathetic to Russia or too friendly to Iran or to making concessions to Assad in Syria. You know, these mortal sins, according to the U.S. establishment. So it's a complicated mix.
Sa'ad Mohsen, the proximate cause for concern, I say proximate because, of course, there are many. The Venezuela story isn't over yet, and there are many other possible flashpoints. Even North Korea isn't actually resolved, despite the little rocket man being hugged like a teddy bear by Donald Trump. But the proximate reason for greatest concern is the situation with Iran. With this military buildup, it only takes even an accident, as Jeremy Hunt, the British foreign minister, put it, that you could get an accidental war, one that is provoked by an event or a series of events, either by people who want to see Iran invaded or people who think they're defending Iran. How do you see that picture?
I think the stall that the Americans have set out in terms of Iran has been there for a very long time. To put it all on Donald Trump as being, if you like, the one to blame for that is not fair. I think the reality is that whether it was Barack Obama or whether it was his predecessors, they've all got this bee in the bonnet about Islamic Republic of Iran and what it represents ideologically, politically, economically. Its influence in the area really is the first time that the American strategy in the Middle East has been challenged successfully. And they've done it right across the theater of the Middle East. They've done it both, I would say, militarily. They've done it culturally and politically, ideologically as well. And this is a fear which lies at the heart of American administration for a very long time, that this kind of rising up of an independent, if you like, Middle East, where people actually can have their own freedom, whatever that freedom manifests itself, political systems, cultural preferences, religious preferences, that right is something which we in the West, as democracies, we value and we respect. But in Iran's case, it seems suddenly we have this kind of moral relativism that kicks in. The American establishment certainly do. And the argument is really that most of what they do in the Middle East ultimately is dictated to them now by Israeli interests, more so than ever before. And there is no tangible benefit for the Americans to actually fight Iran economically or politically. They could do good business with Iran if they behaved themselves and weren't out to regime change constantly, or they weren't out to do psychological operations to turn the establishment there in their own favor, or if they weren't trying to sort of dress them down for nuclear weapons, which they don't have the capacity to even build, while at the same time saying nothing about Israel's 400 plus nuclear weapons, and at the same time pitching for contracts for $80 billion worth of Saudi nuclear reactor programs. At the same time, hypocrisy is at the heart of American policy. Donald Trump's continued that. He's got a set of, evangelical psychopaths next to him, basically now, in the form of Mike Pence, literally an evangelical sort of psychopath, a Christian Zionist. Pompeo too. So Pence, Pompeo, and Bolton. I mean, it is the team from hell, isn't it? Really.
He's not an evangelical. He's just a psychopath.
He's just a psychopath. Okay, fine. We'll give him an allowance on that. So, what does one accept? In fact, the most sane one amongst this group seems to be Donald Trump. So I'm holding out on him. So there you go. That's
well, that is actually a very good point. When Trump seemed to realize that once again he'd been dragged by these psychopaths to the point where he was going to lose a great deal of face either way. Is it bloodier to go on or to go, or as Shakespeare put it? The realization of that seemed genuine to me on the face and in the voice of Trump. Isn't it come to something where the sanest guy in the White House as Donald Trump?
Well, I think that's what we in the West need to really think about seriously, because there are a lot of, if you like, moral questions that I think the West is now facing. And it's been engineered, I believe, by the sort of shadowy forces you were hinting at earlier, George. The reality is that we live in plutocracies. I don't think we live in democracies in the pure sense of the word. And whether that's America, or you could call them, I don't know, kakistocracies or kleptocracies, I don't know. There are various terms given to a society which thinks it's democratic, but actually there are so many, if you like, mechanisms and systems which are outside of the political, control of the ordinary masses, that actually, are we being driven, and are people like Donald Trump almost being engineered to become part of this narrative in the West, where we're going to extremes? So it's extremes on either side of the camp. Where is the middle ground? Where's the common sense? Where's the centre? Where is our morality? That's a big question. And Britain inviting Donald Trump on the back of a drumbeat that they've had facing the Muslim community here in the West, particularly about British values and fitting into British values. Well, where does Donald Trump fit into British values? You know, his notion of democracy, his notion of liberalism, his notion of freedom of speech, his notion on every aspect of what we've been given by the British establishment to be British values seems to contradict our British values, yet we're rolling out the red carpet for him and a whole state visit is organised. I think it's an affront to British values, whatever they may be.
I want to test you on one of your theses, which I've heard you make before. If Iran is attacked, all of America's allies, and I include Israel, will immediately be on fire. Now, we see the panic in Israel when a rocket with no guidance system, basically a firework, is fired from Gaza. What are they going to do when hundreds of Iranian missiles are landing on Israel? What are the Saudis, who have taken all these years and totally failed to subdue a rebellion in the Yemen, how are they going to fight Iran? Qatar, where the airplanes, the bombers are. The UAE, ditto, a war criminal in Yemen. Can I see that, but they can't? That seems unlikely to me. So why would they be encouraging a war on Iran?
It's a desperation. Saudi Arabia is running out of oil. They've peaked already. Some would say it's not going to last long. The gravy train's over. The desert will be the desert once again. And what are they going to do after the oil is gone? Have they built any infrastructure? Do they have any knowledge economy? Have they built manufacturing industries? Have they built an economy which is viable? They've now belatedly recognized that they flitted away most of their Saudi petrodinars into real estate in the US, $3 trillion worth at one count. So they've heavily subsidized and supported the Americans. Their petrodollar has effectively made America the richest nation in the world and has propped them up for long enough. It's over. Time is up. Time is up for them. It could also be time up for the Americans, because they're sitting on a debt of trillions and trillions of dollars. Who are they in debt to? Who are these people who own America, who actually hold it to ransom with this debt? Well, the Saudis and the Israelis and the Americans have been part of this kind of axis of convenience with moneylenders. And I think that relationship is now seriously being undermined. The Chinese, the Indians, the Brazilians, everybody's moving into this space. And I think the West and the Americans can't really expect to enjoy the kind of economic preeminence which the moneylenders have given them over the last 100 years or so. That's where I think we need to sort of look at.
A good point to remember that China possesses more US dollars than America does. We'll be right back. You're watching كلمة with me, George Galloway, on Mayadeen television, coming to you from London, discussing Donald Trump. Earlier, we took the كلمة camera onto the streets of London to see what the people thought. Let's take a look.
what do you think about Donald Trump's visit to London?
It's bad because Donald Trump is a racist.
I haven't heard that he was coming and didn't know that he was coming. I'd rather him not come, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't want him to come to the UK. He shouldn't come. His attitude towards everything's not right, so I don't think he should come at all.
I think he should not have walked in front of the Queen. It's great that he's going to all these different countries, but yeah, that didn't look respectful.
Do you think the government's ignoring public dissatisfaction about Donald Trump's visit to London?
No, I don't. No, I think that Donald Trump is, America in general is our allies, and I think we should butter up more to America than what we should to Europe.
I have seen in the past when he wanted to come to England before that a lot of the country were quite dissatisfied, weren't very happy with him coming over. I know a lot of the UK are not pleased with him coming over, and someone who's a college student, I know some of my fellow classmates aren't either. So
yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of people are very strongly opinionated about it, and it's not really been talked about so much in the media that people are actually quite dissatisfied with it. So yeah, I definitely think they have.
Do you think Britain has benefited from the so-called special relationship with the US?
Again, nothing I know in detail. As someone part of the public, I don't really know. So I guess the fact that I don't even know is probably answering your question already. So
Just on the face of it, it doesn't strike me as a particularly beneficial thing to be having, especially in terms of ethical and moral standing in terms of international relations. I don't think it's particularly beneficial in a lot of ways. Yeah.
The voice of the streets of London. Let's go back to the audience. Madam, let's hear your point of view, please.
Thank you. I am a scientist and more recently a humanitarian general practitioner. So I work in refugee camps where I see the aftermath of a lot of wars. And I think going back to myself with the scientific hat on, I'm quite intrigued actually to maybe consider Donald Trump not so much as a hell raider, but as a specimen that needs to be studied. It's incredible, really, that he has so much success in a way, global or worldly success. And in some ways, I suppose a lot of leaders are in that position where they sort of get to a point where perhaps even the Queen herself, where she really isn't representing, like what you said, George, she's not really representing her own views, but much more the systematic sort of views.
The government orders her to invite Donald Trump.
And I feel quite sorry for the Queen, certainly, for the position she's in, and I do have some respect for her. Donald Trump, very difficult to conjure respect for, but I would say that, with my scientific hat on, I do analyse this situation, and kind of not very much, not the most interesting thing, but it is intriguing the aftermath and the barrage the entourage that he brings with him. So that's kind of what I want to say.
Well, let me ask you a question though on that, because you see, if you'd taken that same microphone onto the same streets about Barack Obama, elegant, suave, well-spoken, polite, no scandal in his personal life, family man, you wouldn't have got that response. But Barack Obama killed a lot more people than Donald Trump. Barack Obama fought a lot more wars than Donald Trump. He imprisoned a lot more black men than Donald Trump. And I could go back, I could go to Bill Clinton, another popular, saxophone playing, rock and roll figure. He killed a lot more people than Donald Trump. got America involved in a lot more wars than Donald Trump. So are we perhaps responding merely to the form of Donald Trump rather than the content, and the form of Barack Obama rather than the content?
Indeed. I mean, I think I'm a Muslim, and in our religion, we're asked to be aware of people who are like smiling death, which Barack Obama could well be. From what you've stated, it sounds like he is. And perhaps Donald Trump is this facade that we need to look beyond. And I agree that, there is more to it, and that's why I think the analytical side is probably more important.
Keep studying him, this specimen. Did you want to have a word? Yes, the lady in the middle. I'll come back to the front in a minute.
Hello, yes. It was more to expand and reflect upon your point, actually. I'm a teacher of primary school children, and I find that nowadays the television doesn't really try to educate people, or the news. It doesn't really inform, it tells you what you should be thinking. And from what I've looked myself, but I'm not sure, please correct me, anybody, if I'm wrong, Donald Trump, I don't believe, has started any wars. I believe Barack Obama started 9. In his terms, I think there were 9.
He inherited 4 and he made it 9.
Yes. And I do believe that Donald Trump hasn't, he's prolonged, like he's carried on with things, but I don't think he has actually started any.
Not yet.
And
not at the time of recording.
Yeah, not just yet. There's still, the day is but young, I'm sure. But yeah, I just wanted to make a point that as a teacher, lots of children that I work with, you mentioned Donald Trump, and he is the total bogeyman of the playground, and people will even do the Donald Trump touch, which is like it. And you go around and say Donald Trump and you touch each other. But from my point of view, there needs to be a lot more education. There needs to be more education so that people realise that he's much of a muchness. Barack Obama was just the same. You should have the Barack Obama touch as well, I believe. That was my point.
What a splendid contribution. The gentleman here.
If there's a war with Iran, the key difference from 2003 is in 2003, America dominated the world, but now Iran is allied to Russia and China. If America does attack Iran, I don't think Russia and China will stand aside. They may not send troops to Iran, but I think they will give it like weapons. So there is a danger of it spilling into a conflict with Russia and China. Nobody seems to have mentioned that.
No, that's a very good point. In 2003, when the United States and Britain invaded and destroyed Iraq, Russia was still in the process of getting on its feet after the disastrous Yeltsin era, the collapse of the Soviet Union, followed by Russia lying drunk on the floor having its pocket picked by the West. Putin had just come to power, and Russia was not anything like as powerful as it is today. China was concentrating on its economy then. It still does today, but China is beginning to flex its political muscles. And Iran itself is not Iraq. Iraq was a broken-backed country, racked by decades of sanctions and internally divided. The whole invasion of Iraq was facilitated by fifth columnists and exiles and so on. This will not be the case in Iran. There are lots of Iranians who hate the political system in Iran, but they are Iranians first and foremost. They're actually, to many people's surprise, many Iranians are more Iranian than Islamic. And if they're Islamic and Iranian, that is actually a very powerful fusion. And I just feel that, as George Bush would put it, they have misunderestimated Iran.
Okay.
You agree? Gentleman next to you.
Thank you very much. George, I'd just like to make 2 points about Donald Trump. The first one is, I believe he's being invaded because he's the president of America, not for his personality or his foreign policy or what he's trying to promote as American values, but because it's the 75th anniversary of the D-Day landings, and he's also going to France. So I can understand that he's been invited on that level. Personally, if he's here, I'll be in the mall with everybody else demonstrating against him. The second point I'd like to make is, I'm wondering, are we beginning to witness the move from celebrity status to political pundit to presidency, because Trump, to my mind, would be the first. But now you're a big fan, or maybe you're not, of Imran Khan, a cricketer. So he has this public persona through the sport, and now you've got the guy who was the joker, the comedian, whose name I don't know, in the Ukraine. So there's like 3 recent leaders all elected, not because
a political track record.
Absolutely, because Donald Trump is a businessman. He's not a politician, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't have the political nuances to be a global world leader, and that's why he's surrounded by these people whispering in his ear, telling him what to do. He sees himself as a businessman who can make things happen. I'll make it happen, tell me what we need to do. And I think that's what he's doing. And on Iran, without trying to be contentious, in Iraq, when you had the war, to my mind, you had the American taxpayer and the British taxpayer paying for the destruction of Iraq and the destruction of Afghanistan and the destruction of Libya. Then you have the Iraqi, the Afghani and the Libyan taxpayer paying for the new security things that are put in place in these countries for the rebuilding of the infrastructure. So one taxpayer bombs the infrastructure, another taxpayer pays to have it rebuilt, and the people that are making the money is the military-industrial complex. So
the people who bombed it in the first place.
Exactly. So when people are saying that, you know, look at the minefield that Iraq turned into, look at the tatters of American foreign policy, I totally disagree. I believe that there's money in regime change, there's money in war, there always has been, and that's the bottom line and the bottom reason why regimes and countries and individuals involved in that go to war, because there's profit to be made. And that's, I feel very strongly that that's what's happening. And in Iraq, I didn't personally see all the divisions until some of the divisions within the Iraqi army refused to take up arms against the foreign invaders because of what was happening in the fifth column in the background. I believe that the similar machinations are taking place in Iran, because we've recently had attacks on, there was an Iranian military or police parade in one of the provinces and it was attacked. So
these are American sponsored sectarian,
yes.
The
same as in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah, and basically they're trying to divide Iran on a sectarian basis, though there's a problem with that because it's an overwhelmingly Shia country. So there's also national, ethnic issues in Baluchistan, Kurdish, and so on. But overwhelmingly, Iran is a united society, and especially in the context of a war. I've told you the story before, I think. I was in Arizona when the Ahmadinejad was running for election. And to my utter astonishment, there was a polling station in Arizona where American Iranians could go and vote.
That's democracy.
And Ahmadinejad won the vote in Arizona. It was one of the strangest things I ever saw. And these people are living in Arizona for a reason. I mean, they don't actually want to live under Ahmadinejad. But if it comes to foreigners raining down rockets and bombs on their country, their people, their civilization, their heritage and so on, you can be sure whose side they'll be on.
But surely, George, the real danger here is that America is, at this moment in time, the world superpower. I mean, shock and all, look what they did to Baghdad. There's no reason, I'm not talking up war here for a second, but they've got an Israeli Air Force, they've got the Saudi Arabian Air Force, they've got the Gulf states. Individually, they might be all very small and very weak.
Sure.
But yes, but that coalition of the willing, with a coordinated attack, they could do huge damage. And with the greatest respect to the Republican Guard, this is just a continuation of the counter-revolution from when the Shah was deposed in 1978, or whenever that was. Yes. So this, and it's also a forward momentum in regime change throughout the world. It's just another domino that they're trying to knock down.
I accept that, but I think you're underestimating Iran's ability to respond. It's true, of course, that the American B-52s can destroy a lot of buildings. The naval assets can do a lot of damage. Yes, Saud Mohsen.
Can I just say
the
that
reality is Iran will respond within minutes.
I think that at the heart of all of this conflict with Iran, perhaps is Hezbollah and the Israel situation. Ever since Hezbollah actually gave Israel a bloody nose, twice actually, in the early part of this century, the Israelis have gone into a paranoia trip. They've really just lost confidence, I think. The problem here is really, ultimately, Israel. If you do not solve the Israeli problem in the Middle East, forget Iran, forget Syria, forget Yemen, all of it pales into insignificance. The problem with solving it, you don't go about doing it by taking Israel's side completely arbitrarily, which is what Donald Trump and his administration are guilty of. Unless you solve that problem, that is a fundamental issue that Iran has a problem with. Ayatollah Khomeini, when he came in, made this a pivotal issue for the Islamic Republic on the basis of ideology, but also very astutely, he recognized that that's where the strings were going to be pulled. And actually, the bulk of the Middle East and the Arab people are on the side of the Palestinians. The governments may not be. They're the stooges and the puppets of the Americans and the Israelis. Most of the Arab monarchies that I can list certainly are. But Iran represents that thorn in the side. Hezbollah, Hamas, the resistance, Assad, what do they all have in common? They all want freedom, they want independence, they want democracy of whatever sort that might represent, but they want the Americans out and they want the Israelis to stop on this greater Israel project, which is still lurking within most of the policy. And that's what's driving the tension, and the potential for world war, if anywhere, is there in that spot.
Patrick, to what extent do the American people know anything about all this?
Well, the first thing is the most Donald Trump knows about Iran, I can assure you, is that he may be able to locate it on a map. And that's as far as it goes. But
it's as a word, it's just too close to Iraq. It's just one letter.
It's easy to confuse.
Just rub out one letter and put in the other.
Yeah, the fluctuate.
In his colouring book.
The Q in the N, they did sort of fluctuate. No, but these are great points that have been made by Moshe and others. And so, you know, in terms of the interest between Israel and Saudi Arabia regionally, you could put a very thin card between them. There's very little daylight, okay? But you also have to expand this out. Since the Second World War, United States has dictated the what you might call the liberal world order, or the post-World War II world order. This has been more or less architected by the United States. That includes multilateral institutions. So we're talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been able to do things that other presidents might not have been able to do, which is to steamroll and dismantle established multilateral institutions like the United Nations, undermining the UN different departments like the Human Rights Council, the WTO, all of these things that we're seeing kind of disintegrating conventions, and the Vienna Convention that the U.S. and Britain...
In the Venezuelan embassy storming, in Iran nuclear deal, these are all the attempt to not bully, but actually to bludgeon Germany into abandoning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that it's building with Russia. The new attack on Cuba, the declaration of supreme extraterritoriality, so that if you sell anything to Cuba or buy anything from Cuba, I'm going to fine you, literally fine you millions, in some cases billions of dollars. And I'll pursue you. I'll sequester your assets in order to get that fine. This is a level of exceptionality, exceptional even by American standards.
This is not only attacking your enemies, but also threatening your allies. Yes. This is nothing new. If you look back at the latter stages of empire, these are some very familiar patterns over history, okay?
At the same time, and I take Fra's earlier point, it is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was a very significant day. The United States' belated involvement in the Second World War was a very important decision that America made. A lot of brave American soldiers left their life's blood on those beaches in Normandy. We are two people divided by a common language, as Oscar Wilde said. We have centuries of not common history, but linked history. We have a cultural bond, a linguistic bond to the United States. We, all of us, have music collections full of American artists and pictures of great American boxers and so on. We don't want to hate America. We don't want to hate Americans above all. But as long as America has leaders that swagger around the world with a giant bludgeon that they're ready to hit anyone, friend or foe, with, I hope the American people can understand that we just can't put up with that. You know, I was once in Seattle in Washington on a radio show, and the host introduced his show by saying, "Welcome to this glorious morning on the greatest country on God's earth." And I was forced to say, don't you understand that that introduction is part of the problem? Because if I'm to accept that you're the greatest country on God's green earth, that means my country is less than yours. Who decided that? Did God tell you you were the greatest country? Was there a vote? Was there an election held? It's this American exceptionalism which is at the heart of the matter, I think.
It's ideologically, the root of American exceptionalism is called vindicationism. This is the idea that we have, God has imbued us and blessed us with this bountiful land and this new free system. We've shed the chains of colonial Britain. Therefore, we're going to evangelize and spread this message around the world. This is, some people might call it exceptionalism, but it's at core, it's vindicationism. Like responsibility to protect and neoconservative imperialism there's nothing difference between those two, because they're both vindicationist. We have this great system. We need to export it, not unlike the British Empire before it, wanting to spread the riches and the education and all the good values that come with our civilization. So America's just kind of taken that really to the next level, following in this empire's iteration.
It is a country, though, that was built upon the physical annihilation, genocidal annihilation of the people that were there before they discovered it. And its first 150 years were built upon the enslavement of tens of millions of black people taken in irons from Africa and brought there to work in the fields. As a bit of humility from Americans might be in order. But you're right to make the point that America was not the first empire. I'm sorry to say it probably won't be the last empire. But most of us feel that it's in its last, not days, but it's definitely in its last decades. I think by the time the youngest person watching this is an old man or woman, China will be a far greater, more important power than the United States. Is that really what lies behind the current anxieties, tensions, aggression?
I think if you read their own writings, you read the sort of papers that are coming out, forward-thinking, grand strategy, absolutely. This is what's coming down the road. So whether it's the port in Sri Lanka or it's Myanmar or these various key, or Pakistan or Kashmir, these key nodes along the Belt and Road project, you'll find instability, you'll find destabilization, you'll find ethnic tension, you'll find sectarian tension, and a lot of this, I believe, and many other people might agree that a lot of it is engineered. This is it's the great game, but now the 20th century version of the great game.
Who'll be welcoming Donald Trump to London?
I'll be on the mall.
I'm going to the demo.
You'll be welcoming him how, madam?
Yeah, I'm Cheryl. I'm a nurse, and I suppose I'll be welcoming and shouting at him. Obviously, Donald Trump will be coming here as a representative of a crumbling U.S. empire. He will be coming, I suppose, to probably thank Theresa May for all the stuff she's helped them with, I mean, by putting back Hezbollah on the terrorist list, recently making up a new story about Iran. Yes, it's Iran who was, had done the ship business and the industry.
Russia.
Joining with Russia, even though he might poke her and say, but why did you get your Christopher Steele to make up that foolish dossier? Had my life miserable for 2 years, but I mean, they're going to have a lot of laughs. Lots of papers will be sold. He's not coming here for majority America. He's not coming here for majority UK. He's coming as a rep of the MIC. He's coming here as a rep of the 1%, the bank and oil cartel. Lots of things they will have in common, but he's definitely going to sell a lot of papers. Because at the end of the day, this is a photo opportunity for him. This is something that he can write about in his memoirs when he comes out of office in 2020.
Not sure he's able to write memoirs.
Lots of money to be made.
Like George Bush, I'm not sure there'll be much of a memoir coming out of Donald Trump.
Who knows? He probably could get a ghostwriter to do lots
by
of
numbers.
Yeah, lots of stuff for him. But they don't get along. I mean, Theresa May and him don't get along, but he's probably coming to wish her goodbye when he leaves office. And obviously, as you just said, he's a representative of the state. America might be a crumbling empire, but they still have the largest military. They still can put a lot of pressure on their allies and their foes. So, there's still much life in them to do much mischief around the world.
Yeah, he'll be looking forward to meeting you on the Mall. That's all we've got time for. I've been George Galloway. This has been كلمة حرة.